Welcome back to the Interconnectedness of Things podcast, where we explore the transformative power of technology and the future of work. I'm Emily, your host, and in this episode, we're diving into the critical topic of ethical and secure AI usage. So, joined with us today with Dr. Hutson is a very distinguished guest, our CEO of QFlow Systems, Tim Koehler. And together we'll be discussing the responsibilities of business leaders in developing and deploying AI safely and responsibly. Welcome to the podcast, Tim. Happy to have you.
Thanks so much for the invite. I'm thrilled to be here and been feeling a little FOMO here in the first early going.
I know. Well, we wanted to make sure that we worked out all the kinks before we got you here. So now now we've got it all figured out and we're so grateful to have you here. And of course, we always have Dr. Hudson here. Um, Want to say hi?
Yeah. Hey, I'm here. Definitely not as important as Tim. So we're just glad to have his greatness on the call today. And Emily, you're awesome as always.
Absolutely. Well, we couldn't do it without you, Dr. Hudson, you and your crazy quips. So, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of the ethics of AI, I kind of want to take a step back, and let our listeners know kind of about your journeys, each of you, and into the world of AI and what kind of sparked the interest and how you got here. So, Tim, do you want to go first?
Sure, be glad to. So, as given this a little bit of thought and realized that I'm almost 30 years in now to providing solutions, IT solutions in one shape or another, from my time as a software engineer now to the CEO. And I've never felt, every step along that way, we've moved from one wave of technology to the next. It almost feels like a startup every single phase.
I can imagine 30 years of software. Just imagine that.
Exactly. So whether it was, working on a Y2K project on an AS400 mainframe to developing thick client applications using Visual Basic to web-based applications on the internet, and now all the way to knowledge graphs and graph databases and AI. Um, what I realized is every step along that way is the security and safeguarding of those systems has been paramount. So there's nothing changing on that front.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point.
I totally agree with you on that, Tim. I mean, it seems like the longer you're in any industry, the similarities and patterns seem to complement each other. You might have slightly different approaches, but a lot of the problems remain the same. And just for anybody who's listening, an AS400 is like a Nintendo Switch that fills a room. So hopefully that's enough context there. That's not like paper based, right, Tim? The AS400, they weren't using punch cards on that one. You were still.
No, we were at a monitor, green screen monitor, but
Oh yeah, the old green screen, nothing better.
spent a summer changing two digit fields into four-digit fields, to prevent the
Oh my
apocalypse from
gosh.
happening in the year
Yeah,
2000.
yeah, that was a big deal. The
We're talking to a frontline worker in
oh yeah, holy
1999.
cow, he was on it.
That's awesome.
Uh, for anybody who doesn't know what the Y2K problem was, apparently, whenever they made the computer programs, they're like, "Oh, we'll never need to worry about the first part of a year. The only thing that matters is the last part." And that was true from like 1960s to 1999. But as soon as the year 2000 came, the systems couldn't tell between 1900 and 2000, which was a big fear. They made a whole show about it called Futurama. Check it out if you can. It was a lot of fun, and nothing collapsed. It was like a big story about nothing happened and no one came.
Yep.
Anyway,
I
Uh,
remember I was just a kid, but it was a big deal in my neighborhood.
Big deal. Just a pup. Just a pup. Uh, well, I'd love to share a little bit about my artificial intelligence journey if I could.
Absolutely, please do.
So I don't have the tenure that Tim has shared, but certainly have done my best to become immersed. And, when we think about AI, especially guys, Tim and my age, we think about Star Trek and we think about Terminator, and we think about all these applications of artificial intelligence as either being the pinnacle of society, like a Star Trek, or some downfall of society, right? There's these two extremes, but all that is nonsense. All of that is, folks out in Hollywood thinking of stories. Where it really came down for me on how I started this is back in college. And for those that don't know, I have earned the title of dumb jock, played football, and definitely got more concussions than I should have. Right. And because of that, I was worried about forgetting things and spent a lot of time with different softwares to try to keep myself organized. That was really the start of all of this. I had all of this information for two undergraduate degrees, and then later two master degrees, and then a PhD while I was working full time. And I started a business during graduate school. I really never figured out how to not do things and like to chill out.
I'll say.
Like, uh, and and so I wanted stuff to help me do that because I felt like there was a lot to get done. And how I figured that out was the more I could be organized and retrieve that stuff, the better off I could be. And that kind of parlayed into data warehousing and data estates, data lakes, and then artificial intelligence. And it kind of breaks down into every single person in the world has the same problem fundamentally. You have the stuff that's really important to you. This can be anything from like you're taking your blood pressure to you want to remember a friend's birthday, right? Really important to you. And then that expands out to your community and your organization, your company, your school, whatever it is. And there's the things that go along with that. And there's different layers of closeness to you that you have to pay attention to. And then finally, there's all the things that happen in the world. Think about your country and the politics and new presidents that we have. We just had inauguration day yesterday. All of that stuff and things that are happening, you're trying to sift through. And the information age has only made the speed by which we can generate and capture that information more.
Hmm.
The veracity, the truthfulness of it needs to be evaluated, the variety of information that we can get, videos and images and text, and the velocity, the speed by which we get it, the three V's of what used to be called big data. And so as we're thinking about AI and the ethics around it, it's a reinvigorated problem that's been there since Tim started. I mean, Tim, the work that you were doing on AS400s was around data. It was around making sure it was accurate, right?
100%. And that's what I love the way that you're thinking about the root problems and how we're going to solve this with the latest wave of technology. Because we live in a world now where, a world of short attention spans and immediate gratification and the latest hype. But
Right.
we really have to be thoughtfully considering these problems at the fundamental level
Hmm. Yes.
to make the biggest impact. And so that's what I love about your journey and how you got here today.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So both of you started talking about how we're getting so much data nowadays with things are going too fast, people have short attention spans, the speed by which we're getting AI is just going at an unprecedented pace. So with all of that, I imagine comes some significant risks. So, thinking about that, the risks, but also the opportunities, what excites you most about where AI is going now, or the current state of the AI industry?
I'll go ahead and start.
Sure.
So what I'm most excited about is really the convergence of technology today. It's the fact that AI and everything that the mainstream is seeing with large language models, and that's all really, really cool. But when you think about combining that with technology like a graph database and knowledge graphs
Yeah,
to really unlock the power of what this technology can do today is what gets me most excited. We're talking about bringing this to you in your domain for with your data and making it your biggest competitive advantage.
totally. And you're talking in terms of enterprises.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
businesses taking really building upon what we've been building for a really long time is we've been very thoughtful about creating relationships between your data.
Hmm.
And now that we can adopt the latest technology that's available to create those relationships in flexible ways and bring the AI and LLMs along with it, we're gonna we have the potential to give breakthrough solutions in a way that I think we're only starting to skim the surface of what's possible.
Totally. To try to solve the big data problem. Like,
Exactly.
you've got this mountain of data, now what do you do?
And so, Tim, you got me pumped up there. So I really want to hop in on what you're talking about with the convergence of these different tools, right?
Mhm.
So why is in your mind, why is the relationship between discrete pieces of data important?
This is the knowledge. This is what we bring, um, the knowledge that's locked away in different places within an organization. There's knowledge in systems. There's knowledge in the people who have the experience in how they operate with these systems. There's
Mhm.
knowledge in the context all around you. It's it's your understanding of how all of this fits together. And now we have technology and tools that are available that can make this so much easier for you. So you don't have to be concerned with, putting all your effort into putting things into the right place and
Mhm.
categorizing them correctly. You could spend all day trying to sift through everything and figuring out what to do with it. But
Yeah,
now
that's
I
called a
believe
librarian, right?
exactly. Now we
Yeah,
can leverage the latest technology that's out there today that does it for you and let it do the heavy lifting while you can focus on what makes you passionate in your job.
Yeah, that reminded me of a talk that I sat in 2009 when I was out in Boston with Harvard Medical. And there was a quote that was given to start a conversation off around how to include data at the point of care. And the quote was, and this was the president of HP, and he said, if HP knew what HP knew, we'd be 3 times more productive.
Mhm.
And that quote stuck with me for this long because I thought it was insane that we didn't know what we knew. I just could not let that go. And what you're talking about is exactly the difficulty of not knowing even what you know, much less an entire organization. And who is going to sit down and become their own librarian? I don't know
That's right.
anybody that would do that. I sure as hell wouldn't. And what happens then? Short attention span, jumping context. I'd rather look at my Facebook feed than go look at the latest ResearchGate publications or find out what the latest research is on whatever topic that would be most important to me. Just give me what I want so I don't have to carry the cognitive load.
That's right.
Yeah, it's too much. And that's what we want to prevent. And so you have a problem with, you mentioned that Nava, of too fast, too many different types, overwhelm. And now we have tools that seemingly can make that better. But tools like AI, specifically generative AI, have a point of diminishing return. So as your complexity increases, the value of these things decrease. And I'm not sure if anybody has stopped to ask why. Why would something that seemingly could break the Turing test, that we all read news reports could pass the bar, have diminishing? How could that happen? How could it have diminishing returns? Tim, do you have thoughts?
I'm going to pass that one back to you.
Fantastic.
You go first.
The reason is what you had talked about before, which is the knowledge graph, the relationships between the data. All of these huge models and the millions, if not billions of dollars that is being invested in creating these things have the same fatal flaw. They are trained on available data. So the question you need to ask yourself is your data available to train it? If all of us are being honest, no, it's not. Some of it is, which is why it's kind of good. But when you start getting real specific, you're not getting that out of your head. You're not training anything online. How many of us write our own blog posts versus consume? How many of us think about the problems we solve on a daily basis and write that down? How many of us are publishing our notes online? No, it was nobody. And as a result, we're never going to get the value from these things. So the knowledge graph is simply another tool that helps communicate to a computer or an AI model the meaningful relationship between discrete pieces of data. Nodes and predicates is the proper terminology. So this means, just like in your brain, a cow can make you think of milk, but also it can make you think of a burger. Well, milk and burgers aren't the same thing, but I know they are because I know that they're related. Computers wouldn't be able to tell that unless you have a humongous relational database, which would then not be performant, right? So that's why this thing was made.
And that's the breakthrough impact that we're talking about, is because you're talking about taking all of this knowledge and information that is currently locked away or forgotten and making it systematic and making it always available, always up to date, that can be, and insights created, predictions, recommendations, predictions to take the actions you need in your business.
Exactly right. And further, I would say this creates three major problems, even though we're talking about connecting this up with AI. If you don't have a knowledge graph, the three major problems that it could bring up. And that's number one, tons of awareness without understanding. So when we're talking about AI coming out to the market, everybody's heard of it by now. Everybody's saying it. Hey, look, I got AI in my app. I'm going to call it Apple Intelligence. If anybody has used Apple Intelligence, they're stretching that last word quite a bit, because it's not really centered on solving a problem yet. And so you have this issue of mass awareness without the understanding. So it's really great that everybody knows about it. It's not really great that no one really understands it, because then they're going to come to conclusions. I was doing that talk in San Diego last year with a bunch of records managers and lawyers. You guys remember me talking about this, where they literally, not figuratively, thought ChatGPT was thinking. because it wrote thinking on the chat.
That's a little scary.
How else would they think differently? And that's where the understanding comes from, that if you really look at how the transformative generation happens, it's all probabilities.
Hmm.
Based on the training model, it's the probability that the next word part's going to be accurate. So I don't know how we can call that thinking when it's just, that's probably right, which is also how you get hallucinations and all the other stuff. Like you'll get made up lawyer problems, or sorry, not lawyer problems. Well, you might get made up lawyer problems. I was not more thinking of case law. It'll make up case law that doesn't actually exist.
That's
Right.
really interesting to me, the perspective around that thinking prompts and giving the perception that that's what it's doing, and people, so that's what they understand. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of the things that really keeps me up at night is when inaccurate data is presented in a very confident, matter of fact way.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads to the second big problem, which is the lack of training controls. So if I am hyper confident, but I don't have controls over how the data was trained or the model was trained, then I learned this term listening to I think the podcast was called My American Life or Modern American Life or something. Anyway, the term is called a modern jackass, and I loved
okay.
it because it's basically saying I've been exposed enough to know of a topic, and I have the confidence as if I have learned this thing for 20 years, but I know nothing. Like you read a magazine article about architecture, and now you're going to give somebody a tour of Paris. It's just this mismatch. And I think that that's the biggest thing when we're thinking about the controls of AI is we will mistakenly put greater confidence onto the result, especially when we don't know better.
Yep.
And I think when folks have the experience, we know that there's the diminishing returns when using these models. We can see it. Not everybody can. The next generation of folks coming in that's living with these things, they will take it as gospel. And they will further disassociate the responsibility of knowing how something is supposed to work and having this be an augmentation, and they will instead make it a replacement. Whether they're doing it consciously or not, that is the danger.
For sure. So
Makes
go ahead, Tev.
it makes me laugh a little bit because I remember when we'd sit around the dinner table and my mom was the best. She would drop some pearl of knowledge, and we would always say, "Interesting, I hadn't heard that. Where did you hear that?" She said, "Well, I heard it on the radio." And that was always we would always look around, became a running joke. But because she heard these things on the radio, it had this sense of credibility that was
Hmm.
just automatic and understood and
Mm-hmm.
not questioned.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the keys is we have to continue to bring that questioning mindset and trust but verify.
Right.
Yep.
I think you're spot on. And I think it's almost like we're at bookends of this, the sorry, but the boomer generation, right? That had newspapers and they trusted. And then we started to get a lot of questioning around the 70s and 80s. So those who were born around that time really, well, we can't rely on just because someone says it doesn't make it true. And now we're getting to the other side where it's, well, I heard it on a podcast, or I heard it on, or I read it on Facebook or TikTok, right?
Hmm.
We give way too much credence to just because it was generated, that must make it true. And so that's where the question then becomes, let me ask you guys this. The divide between privacy and security that these things bring up. So in a world where We know we need to be more forthcoming with what we know if the models are going to work better. We know that. And we have the capability to do that with knowledge graphs. Um, how do we keep our security? And how do we keep what is important to us secure? Or rather, not like encrypted and secure, but the other side of privacy, which is I, I don't necessarily want Emily to know everything that I put into my notes. Or I don't necessarily want my competitors to be able to take advantage of my intellectual property and learning that I've done. So in a world like that, how do you guys think about marrying those two? Because it's a big problem that's coming up. I got to keep my data secure and as a result private, but then how do I take advantage of the models?
Yeah, so a few different ways that I can think of, and that we like to build into our methodologies, and even in the R&D that we're doing on this next generation of AI, is your data is yours. We're going to be fully transparent and full visibility on how we are handling your data. And it's going to be kept inside your domain. We're not going to send it out to third parties. We're not going to sell it to anybody. That is when I was talking about earlier about your competitive advantage, it's yours.
Mhm.
And then within the context of your domain, we the flexibility with access controls and doing this not around arbitrary structures like systems of the past, put it in this folder or this drive, and here's who has access to it.
Yeah.
Well, now we're taking a way more dynamic and data-driven approach that just by the nature of the data itself, we're going to be able to configure who are the right people that has access to that information.
Yeah. And to build on that. So the suggestion here is that we're handling security by using access controls and metadata driven controls rather than location driven.
That's right.
And then from a privacy standpoint, we are leveraging the models somehow, but not releasing any of the company's data. And so how are we doing that?
Local and open source models. So
I think it's the only way, right?
right, we're gonna bring with the platform the ability to these local models can be installed within your own instance, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to send your data outside of your instance,
Mm-hmm.
out to the cloud, out to a third party.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna install those locally,
Mm-hmm.
and we're also gonna give you choice on what you are able to leverage.
Which models you could choose.
That's right.
Yeah. I think the key is our philosophical as well as practical insistence that these models are open source. So when they're trained and provided, when they should be open. Now, we understand there's going to be some proprietary ones for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just going to happen. But the open source models give the greatest option to connecting your knowledge graph with a pre-trained model, which can accelerate what you're already doing to stay on top of your data. The other insistence is that, and this is not necessarily popular because we've seen other companies overtly violate this principle, even if they said in the past they wouldn't. And that's your data is truly your data. When you're using our software, it's not a conveyor belt to the third party models to help improve their models. It is isolated. it is secured, and therefore it is private. So when you are wanting to take advantage of these very large probabilistic large language models so that you can reliably take on workloads and have some of those workloads take on automation, help verify, offer suggestions, help you find connections you didn't know were there previously. All real use cases that all of us here at QFlow have used ourselves with these models. So we know it is possible when done right. And the biggest fear that we have is folks are going to avoid using large language models in industry because they are required to send their data out. And we just said, nope, that's not what we're going to do. And then the other thing that we're going to do is make it incredibly easy to build that knowledge graph. Tim, I don't know if I could train an uninitiated person what the heck a knowledge graph is in any meaningful amount of time. I can draw some pictures and like kind of get them close to the concept. But man, is it difficult to latch onto? And then I'm going to ask them to have a habit to go along with it of refining and hygienically updating their knowledge graph. No.
Well, that's what I was thinking the whole time we were talking about this is like using like you have to train your local LLM. And so then I'm even thinking like, well, how long does that take? And so
Right.
like if I'm investing in something and so let's say I buy a local LLM and
Mhm.
then do I just upload all of the data I have from my company and then it's just trained or
Uh,
how does that all work?
So we have a novel approach that allows us to take structured data from like databases as well as unstructured data and build your knowledge graph automatically. We then give you the user interface that does not ask you to learn a knowledge graph that helps you build it as you work with it.
So I
So
don't even know it's happening.
you don't need to. All
Yeah.
you need to know is that you get to take advantage of it, and magically your reliability increases dramatically with any result when using the LLM within your app. It's fantastic.
And that's the key, right? It has to be easy. It's the way you already work. You don't have to think about it. Just keep
That's right.
doing what we're doing. And we're taking on the ownership of figuring out the smart ways to do all of that so that
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about it.
We're doing all the cognitive load. And the other cool thing is, Tim, just to bring this back full circle to the 30 years of building software that emphasizes the importance of relationships. Our current customers using our current software before we've entered into this new world of knowledge graphs are going to be uniquely positioned because we're already tracking the relationships to convert that immediately into a knowledge graph. So it is a step, a small step for our customers, and it's going to be, well, I was trying to do like a,
Yeah, like a giant leap kind of thing.
yeah, but then I stopped myself. All right, well, everybody gets it.
No, it was great. But you're absolutely right. It's the natural evolution. And sometimes we've been doing it for so long, we take it for granted.
Yeah,
Like, oh my gosh, this is how we've been treating this data. And sometimes, it's hard to even talk about the benefits that you can that doing these things these ways, what it even provides. But that's
yeah.
what's so exciting is because with this convergence of technology, we're finally starting to see it and we're going to be able to leverage it. And wow, I can't wait.
Oh yeah. So to give us next time, Emily,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about how everybody else is doing this wrong.
Okay. Perfect. I
We're
love
gonna
it.
we're gonna we're gonna call people out. We're gonna call the big boys out. We're gonna let
Okay.
them know how they started wrong, how they're continuing wrong, and how they're never going to catch up.
Perfect. I love it. So if you all are ready for a giant tea session on the big boys of AI and how they're doing it wrong, tune in next time for the interconnectedness of things. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Hudson,
Thanks for
it's
having
always a
me.
pleasure. Yes, and if you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode. Stay curious and stay connected.